She was the forgotten daughter, mocked by family and invisible to society. He was the duke everyone wanted, but no one could tame. Cold, wealthy, and famously allergic to marriage. When he offered her one night of pretending to be his fiancée at the Christmas ball, she agreed instantly. But his only condition left her completely shocked. No real feelings, no matter what. A rule that would prove impossible to follow because some hearts refuse to pretend. Before we step into this Regency world of snow-dusted balls and forbidden feelings, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss what happens when two people promise not to fall in love and then spectacularly fail. Now let me introduce you to the players in this dangerous game of hearts. Sophia Alexander had learned to make herself small. In a household dominated by her beautiful cousins and a father too weak to protect her, invisibility was survival. At every dinner party, every social gathering, every Christmas celebration, she perfected the art of disappearing into the wallpaper. But this Christmas season would be different, because Ethan Duffy, Duke of Ashford, had accepted her father's invitation to spend the holidays at Alexander Manor, the most eligible bachelor in England, a man society whispered about in tones of desire and frustration. 10 years of avoiding debutantes, declining proposals, and maintaining his ruthless bachelor status with such efficiency that betting books at White's Club had long odds on him ever marrying. Sophia watched him from her usual position in the corner of the drawing room, fascinated by the way he commanded space without effort. How his cold gray eyes assessed everyone with the precision of a predator calculating threat levels. He was beautiful in a dangerous way, sharp cheekbones, dark hair, a mouth that rarely smiled but devastated when it did. She never imagined he'd notice her, but when her cousins humiliated her at dinner with particular viciousness, Beatrice loudly lamenting Sophia's tragic spinsterhood, while Camilla suggested she might find happiness as a governess since marriage was clearly impossible, the Duke's attention fixed on her face with startling intensity. Later that evening, he cornered her in the frost-touched garden where she'd fled to hide her tears. "Miss Alexander," he said, his voice carrying the cultured coldness that made debutantes swoon and mothers strategize. "I have a proposition for you." Sophia turned, startled, her breath forming clouds in the December air. "Your Grace? The Christmas ball is in 10 days. My grandmother and half of society will be in attendance, all hoping to finally see me engaged." His expression remained neutral, but something flickered in those gray eyes. "I need a fiancé, temporarily. Someone who can convincingly play the role, silence the matchmakers, and then quietly dissolve the engagement after the season ends." Sophia's heart hammered against her ribs. "You're asking me to pretend?" "I'm offering you a transaction. 1 month of public engagement. In exchange, you'll attend every social event as my fiancé, respected, admired, no longer the object of your family's cruel humor." He stepped closer. "You'll have everything you've been denied: visibility, status, the experience of being chosen by the most pursued bachelor in England. Would you accept a proposal that could change everything, even knowing it was built on lies?" "Why me?" Sophia whispered. "Because you're intelligent enough to understand the arrangement is business. Because you have no romantic illusions about me. And because—" his gaze swept over her face with something that might have been approval. "When I witnessed how they treated you tonight, I decided you deserve better. Consider this my intervention." Sophia should have refused, should have recognized the danger of pretending intimacy with a man like this. But years of invisibility and mockery had left her starving for just one moment of respect. "What are your conditions?" she asked. Ethan's expression shifted into something unreadable. "Just one. But it's non-negotiable." "Tell me." He leaned close, his voice dropping to a tone that sent shivers down her spine. "No real feelings, Miss Alexander. No matter how convincing we must be in public, no matter what happens between us in private, we will not fall in love. This is a business arrangement, nothing more. Can you agree to that?" Sophia stared at him, shocked by the coldness of the condition, by the way he spoke of love like a disease to be avoided. But she also saw something beneath his icy facade: fear, carefully hidden but unmistakable. I agree, she said, even as her instincts screamed that she was making a terrible mistake. No real feelings. I can do that. Excellent. He extended his hand. Then we have an arrangement, Miss Alexander. Welcome to your new life as the fake fiancée of the Duke of Ashford. She took his hand, sealing the bargain that would destroy them both in the most beautiful way possible. The frost on Alexander Manor's windows sparkled like diamonds in the candlelight, beautiful and cold, much like the dinner conversation currently eviscerating Sophia's dignity. 27 years old and still unmarried, Beatrice announced to the assembled guests with performative sympathy. Cousin Sophia, you must tell us your secret for remaining so permanently available. Laughter rippled through the dining room. Sophia kept her eyes on her plate, fingers clenched around her fork until her knuckles went white. Perhaps she's holding out for a duke, Camilla added, her voice dripping with false sweetness. After all, why settle for a mere gentleman when one could aim impossibly high? More laughter. Sophia's father, Viscount Alexander, said nothing, as always. Since her mother's death 15 years ago, he'd allowed his nieces to dominate the household, too weak to protect his own daughter from their calculated cruelty. Actually, a cold voice cut through the mockery like a blade through silk. I find women with realistic expectations rather refreshing in this marriage-obsessed society. Every head turned toward the Duke of Ashford. Ethan Duffy sat at the head of the table with the casual authority of someone born to command attention. His gray eyes, famous for their ability to freeze ambitious mothers at 50 paces, were fixed on Beatrice with an expression that made the beautiful young woman pale visibly. Your Grace? Beatrice's confidence wavered. I was merely noting that desperation is far more unattractive than patience, Ethan continued. His tone conversational, but his words devastating. One might argue that the ladies most anxious to secure proposals are the ones who should inspire concern, not those who wait for genuine connection. The implication landed like a slap. Beatrice had been aggressively pursuing the Duke since his arrival 3 days ago, employing every strategy from calculated encounters in hallways to poetry recitations showcasing her refinement. Sophia risked a glance up, meeting the Duke's eyes for a fraction of a second. Something passed between them. Acknowledgement, perhaps, or understanding. Then the moment shattered as Camilla attempted to rescue her sister. Surely your Grace agrees that at some point, waiting becomes impractical? I agree that other people's timelines are none of our concern, Ethan replied coolly. Now, if we might discuss something more interesting than Miss Alexander's marriage prospects, or lack thereof, I'd be grateful. The conversation shifted, but Sophia remained frozen, stunned by this unexpected defense. The Duke of Ashford, the man every family hoped would notice their daughters, had just publicly humiliated her tormentors. Why would a duke defend a woman society had deemed worthless? What did he see that others missed? After dinner, Sophia fled. She wrapped herself in her warmest cloak and escaped to the garden, where frost-covered roses gleamed under a full moon. The cold bit through her clothing, but she welcomed it, anything to feel something besides the familiar ache of humiliation. Running away won't silence them, you know. Sophia spun around. The Duke stood 10 feet away, his evening coat dusted with snowflakes, his breath forming clouds in the frigid air. Your Grace? She dipped into an automatic curtsy. I didn't realize anyone had followed me. I didn't follow you. I simply needed air that wasn't poisoned by false pleasantries. He moved closer, studying her with that unsettling intensity. Your cousins are remarkably cruel. They're honest about what society thinks. Society thinks what it's told to think by people with influence. Ethan stopped a few feet away, close enough that Sophia could see the sharp intelligence in his gray eyes. If someone with sufficient status declared you the diamond of the season, society would instantly agree. But no one with sufficient status would ever. I would. The words hung in the frozen air. Sophia stared at him, certain she'd misheard. I beg your pardon. I have a proposition for you, Miss Alexander. Ethan's expression remained neutral, but she detected tension in his shoulders. The Christmas ball is in 10 days. My grandmother will be there along with half of London society, all expecting me to finally announce an engagement after a decade of avoiding the marriage mart. I'm sure there are many ladies who would be delighted to— I don't want many ladies. I want you. Sophia's breath caught. As my fake fiancé, Ethan clarified quickly, for 1 month. We'll announce our engagement at the ball, maintain the pretense through the season, then quietly dissolve the arrangement with a mutual agreement that we wouldn't suit. No scandal, no blame, just a failed courtship that happens frequently. Why? The question burst out before Sophia could stop it. Why me? Why this? Because I'm tired of being hunted like a prize stag, Ethan said bluntly. Because my grandmother won't cease her matchmaking campaign until she believes I'm genuinely attached to someone. And because— his gaze swept her face. After witnessing how your family treats you tonight, I decided you deserved an opportunity to experience what it's like to be valued, visible, and respected. The kindness beneath the cold words nearly broke her. That's charity. No, it's a business arrangement that benefits both parties. He stepped closer. You'll attend every social event as the Duke of Ashford's fiancé. Your family will be forced to treat you with respect. Society will suddenly see all your positive qualities they've been blind to. You'll experience 1 season of being chosen, admired, and pursued, and even if it's not entirely real. And what do you get? Freedom. My grandmother was satisfied. Society is convinced that I'm capable of romantic attachment. And after the quiet dissolution, several more years before the pressure to marry becomes unbearable again. His expression hardened. I'm offering you a gift, Miss Alexander. 1 month of dignity in exchange for helping me maintain my independence. Sophia's mind raced. It was insane, deceptive, potentially disastrous, and exactly what she'd been desperately craving for years. What are your conditions? She heard herself ask. Ethan's eyes flickered with what might have been approval. Just one, but it's absolute and non-negotiable. Tell me. He leaned close enough that she could smell his cologne, sandalwood and something crisp like winter air. No real feelings, Miss Alexander. This arrangement only works if we both maintain emotional distance. You may play the adoring fiancé in public. You may even enjoy my company in private, but you will not, under any circumstances, fall in love with me. The condition hit her like a physical blow, not because it was unreasonable, but because of how coldly he delivered it, as if love was a disease to be quarantined against. And you, Sophia managed, the same applies to you? I'm incapable of romantic love, Ethan said flatly. It was removed from my emotional repertoire years ago. So, yes, Miss Alexander, I guarantee I will not fall in love with you. The question is whether you can make the same guarantee. Sophia studied his face, seeing past the cold facade to something wounded beneath. This wasn't just strategy. This was self-protection raised to an art form. She should refuse, should run back to the safety of her small, limited life. Instead, she extended her hand. I agree to your terms, Your Grace. 1 month. No real feelings. A business arrangement. Nothing more. Ethan's hand engulfed hers, warm despite the winter cold, strong, slightly trembling in a way that suggested this moment mattered more than his casual tone implied. Then we have an arrangement, Miss Alexander. Something that might have been relief crossed his face. Welcome to your new life as my fake fiancé. I promise it will be an experience you'll never forget. He had no idea how prophetic those words would prove to be. Sophia barely slept that night, her mind spinning with the impossibility of what she'd agreed to. By morning, she'd have convinced herself the entire garden conversation had been a dream, some elaborate fantasy conjured by desperation and December cold. Then she descended to breakfast and found the Duke waiting. He stood as she entered this breakfast room, the gesture catching everyone's attention. Her father looked up from his newspaper. Beatrice and Camilla paused mid-gossip. Even the servants froze in their tasks. Miss Alexander, Ethan said, his voice carrying perfect formality. I was hoping you'd join me for a morning ride after breakfast. There's something important I'd like to discuss with your father. The room went absolutely silent. Sophia's heart hammered as she took her seat, carefully avoiding her cousin's shocked stares. That would be lovely, Your Grace. Excellent. Ethan resumed his seat, then casually added, I should mention, Lord Alexander, that I'll be requiring a private audience with you this morning. There's a matter of some Personal significance I need to address. Viscount Alexander's newspaper crinkled. Of course, Your Grace, whatever you need. Beatrice's face had gone pale. Camilla looked like she might be ill. The implications of a duke requesting private audience with a father, combined with singling out the father's daughter, were unmistakable. 20 minutes later, Sophia found herself in her father's study, standing beside the duke, while her father looked increasingly confused. I don't understand, Your Grace, the Viscount said carefully. You're asking for Sophia's hand? My Sophia? Is there another Sophia in your household I'm unaware of? Ethan's tone was dry. Yes, Lord Alexander. I'm formally requesting permission to court your daughter with intentions of marriage. The words, even knowing they were performance, sent electric shocks through Sophia's nervous system. Her father stared between them, bewilderment evident. But that is, Sophia is of course a wonderful girl, but I was under the impression you preferred ladies of more conventional appeal. Have you ever been told to your face that you're not what anyone would want? That even your own father can't imagine someone choosing you? Your daughter, Ethan said coldly, is the most intelligent, perceptive, and genuine woman I've encountered in years of tedious social obligations. If you're suggesting I should prefer vapid beauty over substantive character, I'm afraid we have very different values, my lord. Sophia's father flushed. I meant no insult, Your Grace. I suggest you become accustomed to your daughter receiving the respect and admiration she deserves, sons, Ethan interrupted. Because after I announce our engagement at the Christmas ball, society will be watching how her own family treats the future Duchess of Ashford. The title hung in the air, Duchess of Ashford. Sophia had to remind herself to breathe. Of course, her father said quickly. Of course you have my blessing, Your Grace. I'm delighted. He didn't look delighted. He looked utterly baffled. The news spread through Alexander Manor like wildfire. By afternoon tea, the entire household knew. By dinner, the shock had settled into various forms of reaction. Her father confused but deferentially pleased. Beatrice, devastated and barely concealing rage. Camilla, frantically calculating whether she could somehow interfere. The servants, whispering excitedly about the Cinderella-esque transformation. And Sophia, trying desperately to remember this was all performance. Ethan played his role with devastating perfection. He sat beside her at dinner, his attention focused on her face with the intensity of a man genuinely fascinated. He asked about her reading, her opinions on current events, her thoughts on estate management. He made her feel seen in ways she'd never experienced. You're very good at this, Sophia whispered during a break in conversation. At what? Ethan's gray eyes held hers, pretending to care. Something flickered across his face, quickly hidden but unmistakable. Is it pretending if I genuinely find you more interesting than 90% of society? According to your rule, yes, no real feelings, remember? Finding someone interesting isn't a feeling, Miss Alexander. It's an observation. He leaned slightly closer. And I observe that you're far more fascinating than anyone in this room gives you credit for. The compliment, delivered with such sincerity despite their arrangement, made Sophia's chest ache. This was dangerous. She was already struggling to remember where performance ended and reality began. That evening, Ethan's sister Penelope arrived unexpectedly for a visit. She burst into the drawing room like a whirlwind, beautiful and irrepressible, her eyes immediately finding Sophia and lighting with interest. So you're the woman who finally captured my brother's heart, Penelope said, ignoring all protocol to clasp Sophia's hands. I had to see this miracle for myself. Penelope, Ethan warned. Subtlety. Subtlety is boring. Penelope studied Sophia with alarming intensity. Tell me everything. How did it happen? When did you know? Did he do something romantic? Or was it all brooding and indirect like I'd expect? Sophia opened her mouth, unsure how to navigate this interrogation. We bonded over books, Ethan interjected smoothly. Miss Alexander has extraordinary literary taste. Books? Penelope's expression turned skeptical. You're telling me you fell in love over books? Why is that so difficult to believe? Because you don't fall in love, brother. You've spent a decade avoiding even the possibility. Penelope turned back to Sophia. What's your secret? How did you crack his armor? I, I don't think I did anything special, Sophia said honestly. We simply connected. Penelope studied them both for a long moment, her eyes too knowing. Then she smiled, warm and genuine. Well, whatever the truth is, I'm delighted. Sophia, you must come stay with me in London before the ball. We'll have you fitted for a gown that will make every woman in the ballroom weep with envy. That's not necessary, Sophia started. It's absolutely necessary, Penelope interrupted. If you're going to be my sister, you'll learn that we Duffys don't do anything halfway. Besides, her eyes sparkled with mischief. If I'm going to watch my brother pretend this is all a business arrangement while actually falling in love, I want a front row seat. Penelope, Ethan said sharply, but his sister just laughed, seeing through him with the ease of someone who'd known him his entire life. And Sophia felt the first tremor of real fear, because if Penelope could see through their pretense this easily, how long before everyone else did? How long before she could no longer deny what was happening in her own treacherous heart? 3 days later, Penelope dragged Sophia to London with the force of a particularly determined hurricane. The next 48 hours passed in a blur of modistes, jewelers, and Penelope's running commentary on everything from Sophia's posture to the ways her brother was absolutely already in love and too stubborn to admit it. He watches you when you're not looking, Penelope observed while Sophia was being fitted for her ball gown, a stunning creation in midnight blue silk that made her look like someone else entirely. That particular expression, I've never seen it on his face before. We're playing roles, Sophia reminded her. He's supposed to look interested. Interested? Yes. Terrified and awed? That's not acting, darling. Penelope adjusted Sophia's hair with expert hands. My brother is a master at controlling his expressions. The fact that he looks at you like you're simultaneously his salvation and his doom? That's real. Sophia's pulse raced. You're imagining things. Am I? Penelope's knowing smile was infuriating. Then why did he specifically request you return to the manor by Thursday? Why did he insist on personally teaching you to waltz rather than hiring a dancing master? Why? He's teaching me to waltz, Sophia interrupted, her voice rising slightly. He didn't tell you? Penelope looked delighted. Oh, this is even better than I thought. Yes, Sophia. My notoriously private, emotionally unavailable brother has cleared his schedule to personally give you dance lessons. In the ballroom. Lone. Every evening until the Christmas ball. When someone who claims to want distance keeps creating reasons for closeness, what does that tell you? Sophia's stomach performed complicated acrobatics. That's just practical. He wants to ensure I can dance convincingly. Keep telling yourself that, Penelope said cheerfully. I'll be over here enjoying watching both of you lie to yourselves. Sophia returned to Alexander Manor on Thursday evening, her new wardrobe trailing behind in multiple trunks. She barely had time to refresh from the journey before a footman appeared with a message. The Duke requests your presence in the ballroom at 8 o'clock. Come prepared to dance. E.D. The note was formal, businesslike. So why did Sophia's hands tremble as she read it? She changed into one of her simpler new gowns, emerald green silk that Penelope had insisted made her eyes look like jewels, and descended to the ballroom precisely at 8. The room was breathtaking. Someone had lit hundreds of candles, transforming the space into a golden wonderland. Snow fell outside the tall windows, and a single violinist stood in the corner. Lord Hartwell, Sophia realized, Ethan's closest friend, who must have been recruited for this purpose. Ethan stood at the center of the gleaming floor, dressed in evening clothes, his dark hair slightly disheveled as if he'd been running his hands through it. When Sophia entered, his eyes tracked her movement with an intensity that made her skin heat. Miss Alexander, he said formally, thank you for joining me. Your Grace. She executed a curtsy that would have made Penelope proud. I understand you are to teach me to waltz. I'm to ensure you can waltz without anyone questioning whether our engagement is real, Ethan corrected. But something in his voice suggested the distinction mattered to him. At the Christmas ball, we'll be expected to dance multiple times, including the first waltz, which will be watched by every gossip in attendance. No pressure, then. His mouth twitched, almost a smile. Come here. Sophia approached slowly, hyper-aware of every step. When she reached him, Ethan extended his hand and she placed hers in it, feeling the shock of skin against skin even through her gloves. The waltz is intimate, Ethan said, his voice dropping lower, more so than any other dance. It requires trust, connection, and the appearance of genuine feeling between partners. He positioned her hand on his shoulder, his own settling at her waist. Are you comfortable? Comfortable was the last thing she felt. Her entire body was on fire from his proximity, from the way his fingers curved possessively against her waist, from how close his face was to hers. Yes, she lied. Good. Lord Hartwell? The violin began, a slow, haunting melody that seemed designed to strip away pretense. Follow my lead, Ethan murmured, and they began to move. Sophia had danced before, but never like this. Ethan led with the confidence of someone who'd done this 1,000 times, but there was nothing mechanical about his movements. He adjusted to her rhythm, guided her through turns with gentle pressure, anticipated her missteps before she made them. You're a natural, he said after several minutes. Why did you tell me you couldn't waltz? I said I wasn't good at it. That's different from can't. You're excellent at it. Stop diminishing yourself. The command, delivered with surprising heat, made Sophia stumble slightly. Ethan caught her instantly, pulling her fractionally closer to stabilize her balance. For 3 heartbeats, they stood frozen, too close, his arm around her waist, her hand pressed against his chest where she could feel his heart hammering. Your Grace, Sophia whispered. We should, Ethan. His voice was rough. When we're alone, call me Ethan. That's not part of the arrangement. He spun her into another turn, and the movement pressed them even closer. Consider it an amendment. I'm tired of formality when there's no one to perform for. But the rule is no real feelings, not to know first name. His gray eyes bored into hers. Are you afraid of what calling me by my given name might mean, Sophia? Hearing her name in his voice, intimate, rough, too real, sent dangerous shivers down her spine. Yes, she admitted. Good. You should be afraid. Ethan's expression turned almost anguished. Because this thing between us, it's becoming far more complicated than either of us intended. When does pretending become reality? When does a role become who you actually are? The music swelled. Ethan pulled her into a complex series of turns that left her breathless and dizzy, clinging to him for stability. When they finally came to rest, Sophia realized Lord Hartwell had stopped playing. They stood in the center of the candlelit ballroom, Ethan's arms around her hands fisted in his jacket, their faces inches apart. We should stop, Sophia breathed. We should, Ethan agreed. Neither of them moved. Then very slowly, Ethan began lowering his head toward hers. Sophia's eyes fluttered closed, her entire body yearning toward a kiss that would destroy their careful arrangement. Ethan. Penelope's voice shattered the moment like a stone through glass. They sprang apart just as Penelope entered the ballroom, her expression knowing and entirely too pleased. So sorry to interrupt whatever this wasn't. Grandmother has just arrived unexpectedly. She's in the drawing room and demanding to meet Sophia immediately. The Dowager Duchess. Ethan's expression shuddered instantly, the vulnerable man disappearing behind cold aristocratic armor. Of course, Miss Alexander, shall we? Back to formality, back to performance. Sophia nodded numbly, trying to remember how to breathe, trying to forget how close she'd just come to shattering the one rule that was supposed to protect them both. The Dowager Duchess of Ashford was everything Sophia had feared, and nothing she'd expected. Tall, elegant, with Ethan's piercing gray eyes and an expression that suggested she'd seen through every deception society had ever attempted. She studied Sophia with the intensity of a general evaluating enemy terrain. So, the Dowager said after several uncomfortable seconds of assessment, you're the young woman who's accomplished what dozens of society beauties could not, capturing my grandson's attention. Your Grace, Sophia curtsied deeply. I'm honored to meet you. Are you? The Dowager's eyebrow arched. Most young women find me terrifying. Yet you seem remarkably composed for someone who's supposedly engaged to England's most eligible bachelor. The test was obvious, checking whether Sophia was genuine or just another fortune hunter. I find terror and respect are often confused, Your Grace, Sophia replied carefully. And I suspect you prefer honest reaction to false flattery. A flicker of approval crossed the dowager's face. Penelope, leave us. Ethan, you too. Grandmother, Ethan started. I said leave. I wish to speak with Miss Alexander privately. Ethan shot Sophia an unreadable look before withdrawing, Penelope trailing behind with barely suppressed glee at this development. The door closed. Sophia stood alone with this formidable woman who would determine whether her fake engagement could survive scrutiny. Sit, the dowager commanded, gesturing to the settee. Sophia sat. My grandson, the dowager began, settling across from her, has spent 10 years avoiding even the slightest hint of romantic attachment. He's rejected princesses, heiresses, and beauties whose families could trace their lineage to William the Conqueror. Then suddenly, without warning, he arrives at a country house party and becomes engaged to a viscount's daughter no one's heard of. Do you understand why I might find that suspicious? Yes, Your Grace. So tell me the truth. The dowager leaned forward. What is my grandson hiding? What arrangement have you made? Because I've known Ethan his entire life, and this engagement feels like strategy rather than sentiment. Do you lie to protect a secret or risk everything by telling the truth? Sophia's mind raced. The dowager was testing her, but also offering an opening, a chance to be honest, perhaps, in ways the public performance didn't allow. Your Grace, Sophia said carefully, I think the question isn't what arrangement we've made, but why you assume any engagement your grandson enters must be strategic rather than genuine. The dowager's eyes narrowed. You're deflecting. I'm suggesting that perhaps Ethan's decade of avoiding attachment had less to do with preference and more to do with protection. And that maybe, Sophia met the older woman's gaze directly. He needed someone who could see past his armor before he could risk lowering it. It was close enough to truth to carry conviction, vague enough to protect their secret. The dowager studied her for a long, silent moment. Then surprisingly, she smiled. You're an intelligent, quick thinking, and you see him, actually see him, rather than the title and wealth. She paused. But do you love him, Miss Alexander, or is this about escaping a difficult family situation? The question was a knife between the ribs, because the honest answer, the one Sophia barely admitted to herself, was that she was terrified of how much she was beginning to care for a man she'd promised not to fall for. Sophia's voice cracked. I think love is more complicated than simple yes or no answers, Your Grace. I think it's something that grows between people when they're not paying attention, when they've promised themselves it won't happen, when they've built rules specifically to prevent it. The dowager's expression softened into something almost sympathetic. Oh, my dear girl, you're already in love with him, aren't you? And absolutely terrified by it. Tears pricked Sophia's eyes. We agreed there was a rule. Rules, the dowager said gently, are what frightened people hide behind when their hearts want things their minds say are impossible. She reached across and squeezed Sophia's hand. My grandson is scared, Miss Alexander. Genuinely, deeply scared of emotional vulnerability because of something that happened years ago. But do you know what I see when I watch him look at you? What? A man who's already lost the battle he's been fighting. A man who's in love and doesn't have the courage yet to admit it. The dowager stood. The question is whether you'll have the courage to admit it first. The dowager left the next morning, apparently satisfied that the engagement, whether strategic or not, wouldn't embarrass the family. But her words haunted Sophia through the following days. You're already in love with him, aren't you? Sophia tried to deny it, tried to remember the rule, the arrangement, all the reasons this was supposed to stay fake. But Ethan made denial impossible. He continued the dance lessons. Each evening, the candle-lit ballroom, Lord Hartwell's violin, and increasingly charged intimacy as they waltzed. They talked during those sessions, their conversations ranging from literature to politics to personal histories neither had shared with anyone else. Why did you stop believing in love? Sophia asked one evening as they moved through a particularly complex turn. Ethan's expression shuddered. That's not appropriate discussion for... We're alone. No performance needed. Sophia held his gaze. Ethan, if we're going to pretend this convincingly, I need to understand what made you so determined to avoid the real thing. He was silent for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, her name was Catherine. I was 22, stupidly idealistic, and believed she loved me for who I was beneath the title. His voice turned bitter. Turned out she loved my wealth and status. When a wealthier option appeared, a prince, actually, she didn't hesitate to accept his proposal. She told me our entire courtship had been her settling for acceptable while hoping for better. Ethan, I learned that day that romantic love is just people performing scripts they think they should follow. The only honest relationships are ones built on clear-eyed mutual benefit. His arms tightened fractionally around her. Like ours. Is that really what you believe? Sophia asked quietly. That what we have is just mutual benefit? It's what it's supposed to be. That's not an answer. Ethan pulled them to a stop, his eyes burning with something that looked like anguish. Sophia, don't ask me questions I can't answer without breaking the only rule protecting us both. When honesty becomes dangerous, do you keep pretending or risk everything for truth? Maybe the rule is what's hurting us, Sophia whispered. No, Ethan released her abruptly, stepping back. The rule is what keeps this manageable. The rule is why we can both walk away at the end of the season with our hearts intact. My heart isn't intact, Sophia said before she could stop herself. Ethan went absolutely still. What? I'm trying to follow the rule. I swear I am. But every conversation, every dance, every moment you look at me like I matter. Her voice broke. I'm failing, Ethan. I'm breaking the only condition you gave me. The confession hung between them like a confession of treason. Ethan's expression cycled through shock, panic, and something that looked terrifyingly like hope. Then his armor slammed back into place. Lord Hartwell, he said, his voice cold enough to freeze fire. We're done for this evening. The violinist departed silently. Sophia stood alone in the ballroom with a man whose face had become a stranger's. Ethan, 3 more days until the Christmas ball, he said flatly. You can maintain the pretense for 3 more days. After that, we'll reassess. Reassess? Whether this arrangement can continue or whether, his jaw clenched, we need to dissolve it before anyone gets hurt. I think it's too late for that, Sophia whispered. Ethan looked at her with devastation clear in his eyes. Then he turned and walked away, leaving her alone in a ballroom that suddenly felt like the loneliest place in the world. The next 3 days were agony. Ethan avoided Sophia with surgical precision. He took his meals in his study. He canceled their dance lessons. When forced into the same room by social obligation, he was distantly polite, every inch the aristocrat maintaining proper form while revealing nothing. Sophia felt herself disappearing again, becoming invisible the way she'd been before the arrangement, except now it hurt infinitely more because she'd experienced what being seen felt like. He's terrified, Penelope told her on the second day of Ethan's withdrawal. They sat in the library, Sophia's refuge, while snow fell steadily outside. My brother has spent 10 years protecting himself from vulnerability. You threatened that, and he's retreating to safety. He's following our rule, Sophia said bitterly. No real feelings. I broke it. He's reminding us both what we agreed to. Or he's trying desperately to convince himself he hasn't broken it too. Penelope squeezed her hand. Sophia, I've never seen my brother like this. The fact that he's running, that tells me he's already in far too deep and absolutely terrified by it. Then what do I do? That depends. Do you want safe pretense that protects you both from heartbreak? Or do you want something real, even if it's terrifying? Which would you choose? Safe distance or risky truth? Protection or possibility? Sophia didn't answer, because she knew what she wanted, and it was the one thing Ethan had explicitly told her was impossible. The evening before the Christmas ball, Sophia finally cornered him. She'd watched him disappear into the library after dinner. She'd waited 15 minutes, then followed. When she entered, Ethan stood by the window overlooking snow-covered gardens, a glass of whiskey in his hand, his posture radiating tension. You shouldn't be here, he said without turning. We need to talk. We've said everything that needs saying. No, Sophia closed the door firmly. We've been dancing around the truth for days. I'm done pretending." That got his attention. Ethan turned, his expression carefully neutral. "Pretending is our entire arrangement." "Not anymore." Sophia crossed the room with more courage than she felt. "3 days ago, I told you I was breaking the rule. You said nothing. You've avoided me ever since, so I'm asking directly, are you retreating because you're angry with me? Or because you're scared you're breaking the rule too?" Ethan's carefully maintained control cracked. "Sophia, answer the question, Ethan, please, because tomorrow we're supposed to announce this engagement publicly, and I need to know if I'm doing it alone or if you," her voice broke, "if you feel anything real for me at all." "Of course I feel something real for you." The words exploded out of him with shocking intensity. "I've been feeling something real since that first dinner when I watched your family humiliate you and wanted to destroy them for it. I've been falling since our first conversation in the garden. The dance lessons, I was torturing myself, Sophia. Every time I touched you, every conversation, every moment I looked at you and saw not the woman society dismissed, but the extraordinary person they're all too blind to recognize." He stopped abruptly, breathing hard, horror dawning as he realized what he'd just confessed. Sophia's heart was thundering in her chest. "Then why?" "Because I'm terrified." Ethan's armor shattered completely. "Because the last time I was stupid enough to love someone, she destroyed me. Because I built this entire rule-bound arrangement specifically to protect myself from this. And you," he laughed, a broken sound, "you've obliterated every defense I had." "So have you," Sophia whispered. They stared at each other across 6 feet of library carpet that suddenly felt like an infinite distance. "What do we do?" Sophia asked. "The ball is tomorrow. We're supposed to convince society we're engaged. But I don't know if I can stand there and pretend anymore. Not when—" "When what?" "When I'm completely, desperately in love with you." The words hung in the air, the final rule violation, the ultimate betrayal of their arrangement, the truth that changed everything. Ethan crossed the distance between them in 3 strides. His hands framed her face with a gentleness that contrasted sharply with the intensity in his eyes. "Say it again," he demanded. "I love you," Sophia repeated, tears streaming down her face. "I broke the rule. I'm sorry. I know it was the one thing you asked me not to do." "Sophia." Her name was prayer and curse combined. "I love you too. I've been fighting it for weeks, telling myself it was just excellent acting, convincing myself I could maintain distance. But I can't. I'm completely, irrevocably in love with you, and it's the most terrifying thing I've ever experienced." "What does this mean for tomorrow?" Ethan's smile was shaky but genuine, the first real smile she'd ever seen on his face. "It means we go to that ball, but instead of pretending to be engaged," he pulled her closer, "we go as two people who are genuinely, terrifyingly in love. No more rules, no more pretense, just us. And after the season, we were supposed to dissolve. We dissolved nothing." Ethan's voice turned fierce. "You're mine, Sophia Alexander. Not because of some arrangement or strategic deception, but because you saw past every defense I built and loved me anyway. If you'll have me, if you're brave enough to love a man this damaged, then I'm yours, forever." "I'm brave enough," Sophia whispered. "Are you?" In answer, Ethan kissed her. It wasn't the gentle, careful kiss of two people testing boundaries. It was desperate, passionate, years of loneliness and fear dissolving into fierce certainty. Sophia kissed him back with equal intensity, her hands fisting in his jacket, her entire body pressed against his. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Ethan rested his forehead against hers. "Tomorrow," he said softly, "I'm going to stand in front of everyone who ever dismissed you and tell them you're mine. I'm going to make sure every person in that ballroom understands you're the most extraordinary woman in England." And then, his lips brushed her temple, "I'm going to dance with you, properly announce our engagement at real, and start building the life we both deserve." "What about your grandmother? Your sister? Everyone who knows we agreed this was fake." "Penelope already knows it became real. Grandmother suspected from the start. And everyone else? Ethan smiled. Let them gossip, let them wonder. All that matters is you and me, Sophia. Everything else is just performance. Sophia laughed through her tears. We're terrible at following rules. The best rules, Ethan murmured against her lips, are the ones made to be broken. The ballroom of Ashford House blazed with light, hundreds of candles and crystal chandeliers, garlands of evergreen and holly, snow falling gently outside tall windows. The cream of London society filled the space in their finest evening wear, all gathered for the most anticipated social event of the season, the Christmas ball, where the Duke of Ashford would finally, officially, announce his engagement. Sophia stood in the ladies' retiring room, staring at her reflection and barely recognizing herself. The midnight blue gown Penelope had commissioned was a masterpiece. Silk that caught the light like water, cut to emphasize curves Sophia had always hidden. Her dark hair dressed with sapphires Ethan had sent that morning with a note. These belong to my mother. They're yours now. Everything I am is yours now. Tonight, we tell the truth. E. You look like a duchess, Penelope announced, appearing behind her with a satisfied expression. More importantly, you look like a woman in love. How are you feeling? Terrified, Sophia admitted. What if I stumble during our dance? What if I say something wrong? What if, Sophia, Penelope turned her around, gripping her shoulders firmly. You're not the same woman you were 3 weeks ago. You're not the forgotten daughter anymore. You're the woman who captured the Duke of Ashford's heart, truly captured it, not just pretended to. So walk into that ballroom with your head high, and let every person who ever dismissed you see exactly what they missed. Have you ever stood on the edge of everything changing, knowing there's no going back, only forward into the unknown? Sophia took a shaking breath, then nodded. She was ready. The entrance was dramatic, specifically designed that way by Penelope and Ethan. Sophia descended the grand staircase alone, appearing at the top while conversation buzzed below. The moment she was spotted, silence rippled through the ballroom like a stone dropped in still water. She was stunning. Even those who'd dismissed her couldn't deny it. At the bottom of the stairs, Ethan waited. He wore formal evening clothes that emphasized his aristocratic bearing, but his eyes, fixed on Sophia with unmistakable devotion, told a different story. This wasn't the cold Duke society knew. This was a man completely, visibly in love. Sophia descended slowly, her hand trailing the banister, her eyes locked with Ethan's. When she reached the bottom, he extended his hand. Miss Alexander, he said softly, for her ears only. You're breathtaking. You're biased, she whispered back. Absolutely, and I don't care who knows it. Louder for the assembled crowd. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us this evening. As many of you have heard, I've asked Miss Sophia Alexander to be my wife. Tonight, with her permission, I'd like to make that official. The ballroom collectively held its breath. Ethan turned to Sophia, taking both her hands, his expression open in ways he'd never allowed publicly. Sophia, 3 weeks ago, I made you a proposal that was so strategic, self-protective, and based on everything I thought I understood about relationships. I told you there would be rules. I promised you it would stay simple, businesslike, safe. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. This wasn't how announcements usually went. But you, Ethan continued, his voice strengthening, obliterated every rule, every defense, every carefully constructed barrier I'd built. You saw past the title to the man underneath. You challenged me, fascinated me, and made me remember what it feels like to actually want something beyond safety and control. Tears streamed down Sophia's face. So I'm asking you again, but honestly this time? Ethan dropped to one knee, gasps echoed through the ballroom, and pulled a ring from his pocket. A sapphire surrounded bars, rounded by diamonds, clearly an heirloom of significant value. Sophia Alexander, will you marry me? Not as part of an arrangement, not to fulfill social obligation, but because I love you completely, and I can't imagine my life without you in it. The ballroom erupted in whispers, but Sophia barely heard them. Yes, she said, her voice breaking on the word. Yes, Ethan. I love you, yes. He slid the ring onto her finger, a perfect fit, as if it had been waiting for her, then stood and kissed her in front of everyone. It was passionate, possessive, utterly inappropriate for public viewing, and absolutely perfect. When they finally broke apart, applause thundered through the ballroom, but Sophia only had eyes for Ethan, and he for her. "The first dance," he murmured, "is ours." Lord Hartwell's orchestra, significantly larger than his solo violin performance, struck up a waltz. Ethan led Sophia to the center of the floor, and they began to dance. It was everything their private lessons had been, but more, because this time there was no pretense. Just two people who'd broken every rule they'd made and found something real in the wreckage. "Your cousins are watching," Ethan noted, as they spun past Beatrice and Camilla, both looking absolutely devastated. "They appear to be in shock." "Good," Sophia said with surprising fierceness. "Let them see what they dismissed." "Bloodthirsty, I like it." Ethan pulled her fractionally closer. "Are you happy, Sophia?" "I'm terrified, overwhelmed, and completely in love with you." "So yes, incredibly happy." He laughed, genuine, unguarded joy, and the sound made Sophia's heart soar. They danced through two more waltzes, drawing an ever-growing crowd of observers who whispered about the Duke's transformation, about the mystery woman who'd accomplished the impossible, about whether this was really love or something else entirely. Do you care what others think when you found something real? Or does their opinion become meaningless compared to the truth you know? Sophia didn't care. Let them gossip. Let them speculate. She was dancing with the man she loved, wearing his ring, building a future neither had expected, but both desperately wanted. Later that evening, after Sophia had been introduced to what felt like every member of the ton, Viscount Alexander approached them with obvious trepidation. "Your Grace, Sophia," he cleared his throat awkwardly. "I wanted to. That is, I should have." "You should have protected your daughter from cruelty," Ethan said coolly. "You should have valued her intelligence and character instead of allowing others to diminish her. You should have been the father she deserved." Sophia squeezed Ethan's hand in warning, but her father shook his head. "You're right, Your Grace. Absolutely right." He turned to Sophia, his expression crumbling. "I failed you, darling girl. After your mother died, I couldn't bear the grief, so I became weak. I let your cousins run roughshod over you because discipline required strength I didn't have. I stood by while they hurt you because intervening would have required courage I'd lost." Tears gleamed in his eyes. "I'm so sorry, Sophia. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'm asking for it anyway." Sophia's throat tightened. "Papa, I'll understand if you can't, but I want you to know that watching the Duke defend you, seeing how he looks at you, realizing you found someone who values you the way I should have," his voice broke. "It's taught me what real love looks like, and I'm grateful you found it, even if I failed to provide it." The apology, unexpected and raw, cracked something open in Sophia's chest. "I forgive you, Papa, and I hope you'll be part of our life going forward." Her father embraced her, and Sophia let herself cry against his shoulder, for the years of neglect, for the pain she'd endured, but also for the possibility of healing. When they separated, Ethan extended his hand to Viscount Alexander. "My father-in-law," he said formally, "I expect you to treat Sophia with the respect she deserves from this point forward. Can you do that?" "With everything I have, Your Grace, you have my word." The evening wound down with toasts, congratulations, and more dancing. Sophia found herself surrounded by women who weeks ago wouldn't have acknowledged her existence, now desperate to befriend the future Duchess of Ashford. But the only person she wanted to be with was Ethan. As midnight approached, he pulled her onto a secluded balcony overlooking snow-covered gardens. "Tired?" he asked, wrapping his coat around her shoulders against the December cold. "Exhausted, happy, overwhelmed." Sophia leaned against him. "Is this real? Sometimes I still can't believe this is my life now." "It's real." Ethan turned her to face him, his expression solemn. "Sophia, I need you to understand something. I'm not perfect. I'm going to be difficult sometimes. My past makes me mistrustful. I'll probably struggle with emotional openness for years, but I promise you," his hands cupped her face, "I will love you fiercely, protect you absolutely, and spend every day trying to be worthy of the gift you've given me." "What gift?" Hope, the possibility that I can be more than my damage, a future that doesn't feel like prison. He kissed her softly. You saved me, Sophia. I want to spend our marriage saving you right back. From what? From ever feeling invisible again, from doubting your worth, from anyone who tries to diminish you. His eyes burned with intensity. You're extraordinary, and I will make sure the entire world knows it. Sophia kissed him, pouring every ounce of love and gratitude into the gesture. When they finally separated, both breathing hard, Ethan smiled. That genuine, unguarded smile she'd worked so hard to earn. Come, he said, taking her hand. Let's go back inside and dance until dawn. Tomorrow we'll start planning our wedding. But tonight we just celebrate that we broke every rule and found something perfect in the wreckage. Best broken rule ever, Sophia murmured. Agreed. Ethan pulled her close, swaying to music that drifted from the ballroom. Welcome to your new life, future Duchess. I promise it will be extraordinary. And as snow fell around them and music played and society gossiped inside, Sophia believed him. Because sometimes the best stories are the ones where you promise not to fall in love, and then discover that's the only rule worth breaking. The week following the Christmas ball passed in a whirlwind of activity. News of the Duke's engagement spread through society like wildfire, generating gossip, speculation, and, most satisfyingly, complete social rehabilitation for Sophia. Invitations flooded Alexander Manor. Women who'd previously ignored Sophia now desperately sought her friendship. Men who'd dismissed her suddenly discovered she'd been fascinating all along. It's nauseating, Sophia told Penelope during a morning call. These are the same people who watched my cousins humiliate me for years and said nothing. Welcome to society, Penelope replied with knowing cynicism. They worship power and proximity to it. You're the future Duchess of Ashford now. Everyone wants to be your friend. Everyone except the people I'd actually want as friends. Not true, you have me, Isabel, and Penelope's eyes sparkled with mischief. My brother, who apparently can't go 3 hours without finding excuses to visit you. It's adorable and slightly pathetic. As if summoned, Ethan appeared in the doorway. I'm not pathetic. You rode over this morning because you needed to discuss wedding plans, Penelope pointed out. You were here yesterday for the same reason. And the day before that. Brother, you're courting your own fiancée. Is that a problem? Ethan directed the question at Sophia, his expression softening in ways it never did for anyone else. Not even slightly, Sophia assured him. Then Penelope's opinion is irrelevant. Ethan crossed the room and kissed Sophia's hand with old-fashioned gallantry. Good morning, my love. Did you sleep well? After you sent that note at 2 in the morning about flower arrangements? Eventually. The peonies versus roses debate is critical. It's December. Neither will be available. Sophia laughed at his crestfallen expression. But I appreciate your investment in the details. I want our wedding to be perfect. It will be perfect because we're getting married. The flowers are secondary. Penelope made exaggerated gagging sounds. You two are disgustingly sweet. I'm leaving before I develop a cavity. She kissed Sophia's cheek, whispered, He's absolutely smitten. Enjoy it. And departed with a wave. Alone finally, Ethan pulled Sophia into his arms. I missed you. You saw me 12 hours ago at dinner. And I missed you the entire 12 hours since. He buried his face in her hair. Is this normal? This constant wanting to be near you? I think, Sophia said softly, it's called being in love. Terrible condition, highly inconvenient. But his arms tightened around her. I wouldn't trade it for anything. Have you ever loved someone so completely that their presence becomes as necessary as breathing? They stood that way for several minutes, just holding each other, before Ethan pulled back with obvious reluctance. I have something for you. He reached into his jacket and produced a small leather journal. My mother kept diaries throughout her marriage to my father. I've been reading them and his voice caught. I thought you should see this entry. Sophia opened the journal to a marked page, reading elegant handwriting dated 35 years prior. I'm teaching my son that love is weakness because his father demands it. But secretly, I pray he'll be strong enough to embrace vulnerability instead. Strong enough to find a woman who sees past his armor. strong enough to break the cycle of emotional distance that has plagued the Duffy men for generations. My dearest wish is that someday, my Ethan will discover that the greatest strength is allowing yourself to be loved completely. Margaret Duffy. Tears streamed down Sophia's face. Ethan, she would have loved you, he said hoarsely. She would have celebrated that I found someone who made me brave enough to feel. I wish, he stopped, composing himself. I wish she could have met you. Tell me about her. So Ethan did. They spent the morning in the library, Ethan sharing memories of his mother, her kindness, her intelligence, her quiet rebellion against his father's emotional coldness. Sophia listened, understanding more with each story how Ethan had learned to protect himself and how much courage it took for him to love her openly now. She died when I was 17, Ethan said finally, a fever that came on suddenly. She made me promise, right before the end, that I wouldn't let fear dictate my life, that I'd find someone worth the risk of heartbreak. He pulled Sophia closer. I broke that promise for 15 years, then I met you, and broke every rule instead. Sophia murmured, best decision I ever made. That afternoon brought an unexpected visitor, Beatrice. Sophia's cousin arrived at the manor looking diminished somehow, the confident cruelty that had characterized her for years replaced by obvious nervousness. Sophia, she said, twisting her hands together, may I speak with you privately? Ethan, who'd been reading in the corner, immediately stood with protective intensity. Whatever you need to say to my fiancé, you can say in front of me. Please, Beatrice whispered. I know I don't deserve privacy or consideration, but I'm asking anyway. Sophia exchanged glances with Ethan, then nodded. It's all right. He kissed her forehead, a gesture of trust, and left, though his parting look at Beatrice carried clear warning. Alone with her cousin, Sophia waited. I'm sorry, Beatrice burst out, for everything, for years of cruelty, for making you feel worthless, for standing by while Camilla and I destroyed your confidence. Tears streamed down her face. I have no excuse except insecurity and jealousy, which aren't excuses at all, just explanations. Sophia remained silent, processing this unexpected apology. You were always smarter than us, Beatrice continued, more genuinely kind, more interesting. I was beautiful and accomplished and perfectly trained for society. But I was hollow, Sophia. I had nothing of substance, so I destroyed you to make myself feel superior. She laughed bitterly. Then the Duke looked past all my beauty and accomplishments and chose you. Because substance matters more than surface. And I've spent the past week realizing how much I destroyed someone who could have been a real friend. Why are you telling me this, Sophia? Sophia asked quietly. Because I'm hoping, probably foolishly, that someday you might forgive me. Not now, maybe not ever. But I needed you to know that I recognize what I did was unforgivable, and that seeing you happy, loved, valued the way you always deserved. Beatrice's voice broke. It's taught me more about my failures than anything else could have. Do you forgive someone who hurt you repeatedly? Do you risk trust again or protect yourself from further harm? Sophia considered her cousin, this woman who'd made her life miserable, who was now genuinely remorseful, who seemed to finally understand the damage she'd caused. I can't forgive you today, Sophia said honestly. The hurt is too recent, the year's too long, but she paused. I can acknowledge your apology. I can appreciate that you recognize your actions were wrong. And maybe eventually we can find some form of peace between us. That's more than I deserve, Beatrice whispered. Yes, it is. Sophia stood. But I'm learning that sometimes we give people more than they deserve because that's who we want to be. Not for them, for ourselves. Beatrice nodded, then left quietly, leaving Sophia alone with complicated emotions. Ethan returned immediately. Are you all right? I think so. Sophia leaned against him. Is it weak to consider eventually forgiving someone who hurt me so badly? Absolutely not. Forgiveness, real forgiveness, takes far more strength than holding grudges. He tilted her face up. But it's your choice, Sophia, your timeline. And whatever you decide, I support you completely. Even if I eventually forgive them? Even then, though I'll probably still want to throttle them periodically on your behalf. Sophia laughed through tears. I love you. I love you too, more than I have words for. The wedding took place 6 weeks later in Ashford's private chapel, a beautiful stone building covered in snow. Filled with evergreens and white roses, they'd found hothouse roses after all, and packed with people who loved them. Sophia wore a gown of ivory silk that made her look like something from a fairy tale. Penelope had insisted on seed pearls and delicate embroidery, creating a dress that was both elegant and romantic. "You're stunning," Isabel breathed, helping with the final adjustments. "And so happy. Sophia, I've never seen you like this." "I never imagined I could be like this," Sophia admitted. "Happy, loved, worthy." "You were always worthy," Isabel corrected firmly. "You just finally found someone who recognized it." A knock at the door, and Viscount Alexander entered. He'd been working hard to rebuild their relationship, small gestures of care, genuine interest in her happiness, stepping up to protect her from remaining family drama. "It's time," he said softly. "Are you ready?" Sophia took his arm. "More than ready." The chapel was perfect. Candles created warm light against stone walls. Flowers filled every alcove. Their closest friends and family filled the pews. Penelope crying happily, the Dowager Duchess looking satisfied, Lord Hartwell ready to provide music. And at the altar, Ethan waited. He wore formal dress, but Sophia barely noticed the clothes. She only saw his face, open, vulnerable, full of love and anticipation as he watched her approach. When she reached him, he took her hand with trembling fingers. "You're beautiful," he whispered. "You're biased," she whispered back, completely, and grateful for it. The ceremony was traditional but infused with personal meaning. They'd written their own vows, promises that acknowledged their unusual beginning, their broken rules, their journey from pretense to profound reality. "Sophia," Ethan said when his turn came, "I asked you to pretend to be mine for 1 month. Instead, you became mine for real, heart, soul, and forever. You saw past every defense I built and loved me anyway. You made me brave enough to feel, strong enough to be vulnerable, and hopeful enough to believe in futures I'd given up on. I promise to love you fiercely, protect you absolutely, and spend every day ensuring you never forget your extraordinary worth. Thank you for breaking every rule and teaching me that the greatest strength is allowing yourself to be loved." There wasn't a dry eye in the chapel. Sophia took a shaking breath. "Ethan, you offered me one night of visibility. Instead, you gave me a lifetime of being seen. You defended me when no one else would. You valued what society dismissed. You saw not who I pretended to be, but who I actually was, and loved that person completely. I promise to love you through fear and joy, to be your safe harbor when the world feels dangerous, and to remind you every day that you're not the damage you've survived, but the man you've chosen to become. Thank you for risking your heart and letting me keep it safe." Have you ever witnessed a moment so pure it restored your faith and love? They exchanged rings, matching bands inscribed with "no rules" on the inside, a private joke about the condition that had started everything. When the vicar pronounced them married, Ethan kissed Sophia with such tender passion that spontaneous applause erupted through the chapel. "Hello, wife," he murmured against her lips. "Hello, husband," she replied. "Was it worth breaking the rule?" "Every single time, for the rest of our lives." 2 years later, the Duchess of Ashford's literary salon was the most sought-after invitation in London. Every Thursday, Sophia hosted discussions of contemporary literature, philosophy, and social issues in Ashford House's library, a gathering that had become famous for its intellectual rigor and lack of pretense. Women who'd once dismissed her now clamored to attend, but Sophia carefully curated the guest list, prioritizing substance over status, creating space for genuine discourse rather than social posturing. "You've changed society," Isabel observed one Thursday evening after the other guests had departed. "Made intelligence fashionable again." "I just created the space I always wished existed," Sophia replied, organizing books. "Ethan helped." "Ethan enables," her husband corrected, entering with their infant daughter cradled against his chest. Lady Margaret here was crying for her mother. Sophia's heart melted. It did every time she saw Ethan with their daughter. The cold Duke society remembered had vanished entirely, replaced by a man who spoke in silly voices, sang lullabies off-key, and looked at his daughter like she'd hung every star. "Hello, my darling," Sophia cooed, taking Margaret from Ethan. "Were you telling Papa that literary salons are boring?" She was eloquently expressing that opinion through volume and persistence, Ethan confirmed. He wrapped his arms around both his wife and daughter. "Are you happy, Sophia?" "Sublimely. You?" "More than I ever imagined possible." He kissed her temple. "Thank you." "For what?" "For breaking the rule. For refusing to let me hide. For loving me enough to risk everything." His voice roughened. "You saved me, Sophia. You and Margaret. You gave me the family I'd stopped believing I deserved." "We saved each other," Sophia corrected softly. "That's how it works." They stood that way, the Duke and Duchess of Ashford with their daughter, surrounded by books and soft lamplight. A family built on broken rules and brave hearts. "Do you ever regret it?" Ethan asked. "The fake engagement? How did it started?" "Not even for a moment." Sophia smiled up at him. "Because it led to this, to us, to real love that's so much better than any pretense." "To broken rules," Ethan murmured. "To broken rules," Sophia agreed. "The best ones always are." And in the library where they'd first confessed their feelings, surrounded by evidence of the intellectual life Sophia had built and the love they'd created against all odds, the former wallflower and the cold Duke lived out their happily ever after. Because sometimes the greatest love stories are the ones where you promise not to fall in love, and then discover that's the only rule worth breaking. Did you love watching Sophia and Ethan break every rule on their way to happily ever after? This was the story of fake engagements becoming real love, of two damaged people finding healing in each other, of discovering that sometimes the best relationships are the ones you promised yourself wouldn't happen. What did you think? Would you have agreed to Ethan's shocking condition? At what point did you realize they were both already breaking the rule? Drop your thoughts in the comments below and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss our next historical romance about forbidden love, impossible conditions, and the courage to risk everything for happiness. Remember, sometimes the best love stories start with the worst ideas, and the greatest romances are built on broken rules and brave hearts.